Welcome back to PS2 in Review. My name is Ethan, and this time we'll be looking at a game I'm betting a fair few of you haven't even heard of, Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil. It was developed and published by Namco and released exclusively for the PlayStation 2 in Japan on March 22nd, 2001, in North America on July 25th, 2001, and in Europe on November the 9th, 2001. It's the first and only direct sequel to the original Klonoa and received a lot of critical praise on release. But has this cult classic held up, or is it not all it's cracked up to be? Let's find out together on this episode of PS2 in Review. Before we get started, this video wouldn't be possible without TV production classes at Jefferson College. These courses are part of the college's new Digital Communications degree program. Students have the opportunity to learn the basics of video production, including videography and editing. Students can also create content in the JCTV Media Studio on campus, where we are recording this video right now. You can learn more about all that by emailing us at jctv@jeffco.edu. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, let's take a look at the game here. First of all, right off the bat, you're just going to notice the really unique art style you got going on. I mean, you know, it's definitely got the, like, Japanese cuteness kind of thing, you know, the big eyes and everything, but I think this looks great. I mean, it's streamlined from the first game, for sure. I mean, it's not as busy. You know, he had, like, the collar and all that kind of stuff going on in his original artwork, but this looks fantastic. You've got, you know, the wind ring there that you use to grab enemies. You got the surfboard, wind board, desert board. He boards on a lot of things in this game. Got the spine there. Got the back, which it kind of looks like it's wraparound artwork. It's not quite. It wraps around to the spine, and then it interrupts on the back for some reason. Don't ask me why there. I do love these overlapping screenshots that you've got in the back. It's quite nice. Popping it open. You've got the disc, and I'll be honest, I stared at this for a while before I just decided that I don't know what this is supposed to look like. I don't know if that's like a rushing effect it's got going on. I really don't know what this is supposed to be, but you know, maybe one of you guys can tell me in the comments. Taking a look at the manual here. So this is mostly a very good manual, but this is one of those things, I don't know if Namco does this on all their games. I know Capcom certainly did, where it's black and white despite the fact that it's not a greatest hits edition. So if you're not familiar, PlayStation 2 had these black stripe copies and these red stripe copies. Black stripe copies were always in color for the most part, and the red stripe copies, their manuals were always in black and white. This has several exceptions, most notably Capcom games are always in black and white regardless of what edition they are. This one's also in black and white despite being not a greatest hits copy. This is a good manual. It's got that great artwork inside of it. This really cool map of the whole game world. It's well produced and everything. It would just do a lot, a color would do a lot for this. So it's a little disappointing in that way, but all things considered, you know, it's well produced. It's got the Namco software registration card, which is kind of fun when you see those added in at the end. Your notes, your hints and tips, all that jazz. So yeah, that is the box. Put that back together. Let's take a look at the game. Part 1. Why is there a 2 at the end? Generally speaking, when I make these videos, I am reviewing a game based on little to no prior experience with it. I do my best to come in fresh and to not read any reviews until at least a first draft of the script is done. Such is the case with Klonoa 2, with a small asterisk. I played the Wii remake for this game when I was a small child and absolutely loved it. I thought it was weird and colorful and was probably the first video game to make me emotional. It was never my favorite game, but it was to me as Tim Burton movies were to other kids. Mostly good, but if you like it, you're probably a little weird. It stayed lodged in my brain as a kind of weird thing I vaguely remembered until I rediscovered it in my adulthood and bought the original PS1 version on the PS Vita digital store. Because of course I'm one of the 5 people that owned a Vita, right? The original version was just as special and incredible as the one that I had played when I was younger. So when I, relatively new to collecting PlayStation 2 games, discovered that there was a direct sequel to my childhood cult classic, I had to try it out. I have since discovered that there are in fact many Klonoa games, several for the Game Boy Advance, one exclusive to Japan, a beach volleyball spin-off on the PS1, and one for the Wonder Swan, a console that I only learned existed the same time that I learned about this game. Klonoa 2, however, was the sequel to the story that I had loved so much, a follow-up to the heartbreaking ending to the first game. I was expecting solid platforming, gorgeous art direction, beautiful music, and some closure to the events of the previous game. I got some of those things, but Klonoa 2 is more interested in responding to the first game tonally rather than narratively. As a sequel to the story of the first game, Klonoa 2 might be found lacking. As a sequel to the themes of the first game, though, I think it works remarkably well. Now, I'm sure plenty of you are thinking to yourself, what exactly is the weird cat-rabbit thing on the cover of the box? And that's a valid question. After only recently covering the entire Sly Cooper trilogy, you might find it surprising that I would jump straight to a sequel instead of covering the franchise in order. I did this for 3 reasons. The first game came out on the original PlayStation and not the PlayStation 2, so until there comes a day when I start a series called PS1 in Review, I just won't be discussing the game here. The second and more materialistic reason is that the original game is ludicrously expensive on the aftermarket, with most sold listings on eBay coming in at well over $350. As much as I love the game, I think I will hold off until the ultra-rich uncle I don't have dies. Thirdly, and finally, Klonoa 2 is not as direct a sequel as I had initially thought it would be. There are references said and allusions made, but by and large, this game stands on its own. This makes me quite comfortable leaving the first one in the realm of a possible, if unlikely, future video. Besides, Klonoa 2 is plenty interesting all by itself. The levels are bigger, the story is more ambitious, and the music is just as good as it's always been. So without further ado, let's talk Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil, a personally very long-awaited sequel. Part 2, where we left off. We start our story with Klonoa, our protagonist, floating in a black void. He is summoned to a new world by a mysterious voice and quickly encounters Lolo, a priestess in training, and Popka, her Pokemon-looking sidekick. We are quickly introduced to the basic mechanics and one of the game's antagonists, a pirate named Leorina and her pet cat named, Tat. This first level sets the tone for the story quite well, and it creates this tone with the physical construction of the level itself. Darkly lit, but with a bright core. The darker parts of the narrative are sprinkled throughout, but for the most part the game maintains a tone of fun and adventure. The main quest consists of ringing the 4 bells of awakening. Oh, sorry, hold on. The bells of... Oh, okay. Tranquility, joy, discord, and indecision. I guess the bells of awakening were shipped somewhere else. Anyway, each bell bestows an element, and all 4 are needed to prevent an evil 5th bell from being rung and causing a great calamity. Leorina wants the elements for herself so she can use the power of the 5th bell to get revenge on the whole world for making her feel insignificant. If this video is your first experience with the Klonoa games, you might be thinking to yourself that this doesn't sound much like a sequel as much as a standalone story, and you would be right. I have to briefly touch on the ending of the original Klonoa here, and I highly recommend you go play that game, so if you want to avoid spoilers, skip to this timecode. If, on the other hand, you don't mind spoilers, here we go. Klonoa Door to Phantomile ends with Klonoa's best friend, Hupao, revealing that Klonoa's memories of growing up in Phantomile are fabricated, and now that the world is about to be reborn, he will be forcibly ejected from this reality. As the Song of Rebirth is sung, Klonoa and Hupao desperately cling to one another as Klonoa alone is sucked into a hole in the sky, never to be seen again. This is an incredibly sad ending for a children's game, and all but demands some kind of narrative follow-up in any potential sequel. Klonoa 2 does not directly follow up on the ending of the first game at all. Klonoa doesn't even seem all that sad, which he most certainly should be, given the whole ripped out of your best friend's arms thing. Ordinarily, this lack of direct follow-up would be a major criticism, and it was for about the first half of my playthrough, until I realized that Klonoa 2 was responding to the events of the first game, but instead of a narrative response, it responded thematically. While I don't think it's as satisfying as a direct sequel would have been, I do think it makes Klonoa 2 creatively fascinating. Part 3. A sequel that's not a sequel. Thematic sequels are much more rare than narrative sequels, but they have so much more room to play than narrative ones. So it's a little odd that Klonoa 2 doesn't use that freedom to take as many mechanical risks as it otherwise could. The basics of gameplay remain intact, the boss fights are quite similar in form, and even the basics of story structure remain the same. The biggest immediate change is how the game looks. The art direction is, of course, fantastic, but the star of the show is the rendering power of the PlayStation 2. Long falls, huge environments with no loading screens, the game is pretty, and the designers know it. Primarily, however, the big swings happen in the narrative. While Klonoa himself doesn't have much of an arc, Lolo, the friendly priestess in training, most certainly does. Lolo has spent her life trying to become a priestess, essentially a magical nun, but has so far been unable to achieve her goal. She's been mocked by her fellow students for failing to progress, and her last hope is that this strange, rabbit-looking boy who fell from the sky might help her get where she needs to go. It's her, not Klonoa, who is set on the journey to prevent the rise of the fifth bell. Klonoa is there to help her, not the other way around. Despite Klonoa's status as Player 1, he remains on that narrative back burner, and honestly that's alright with me, because Lolo is a compelling character. Her doubts about herself and her abilities aren't just subtext that fade into the background once the story gets going either. Along the way, we meet her old mentor who encourages her to keep going, and there's even a whole level about her confronting her inner self, and it is spectacular. On your journey to the fourth bell, you come across a city called Mira Mira. The people there don't have much interest in the outside world, they choose instead to look into the mirror. The mirrors there show them old places and memories. Why leave when the whole world is on the other side of the glass? Mechanically, this is the most engaging level in the game. The puzzle solving here is the best the game has to offer, and the platforming is challenging without getting in the way of that. Thematically, though, this level sings. Unlike the previous levels, the architecture doesn't even try to give the impression of being a practical space. Instead, it's a bizarre kaleidoscope of colors and shapes, recursive rooms, and many, many mirrors. Whenever you pass in front of these mirrors, you can hear the sound of children laughing. Not a happy laughter either, it's a rueful, mean-spirited laughing. They aren't laughing at Klonoa, though. They're laughing at Lolo. At the end of the level, you start to pass by a mirror, but Klonoa stops, saying that he thinks he hears something. Suddenly, Lolo is in the mirror, or we are in Lolo's memories. She stands in a black void being mocked by her fellow initiates. All of them have achieved priestesshood, something that she has so far been unable to do on her own. They tell her that she is nothing, just a failure. Then the prophet who started the gang on their quest appears, telling her that it is her power that will help Klonoa save the world. The wind ring appears and floats towards her as her peers laugh at her, the same laughter that we heard in the mirrors throughout the level. She grabs the ring, saying to herself, "I know I am not a failure. I know I have what it takes." And her memory shatters like broken glass. This scene is nothing short of incredible. Aside from being a beautiful character beat, it also is a good use of cinematic fundamentals. The framing of Lolo as feeling smaller than her classmates, and then taking up the whole frame by the end, is simple, but it works perfectly. The entire level is a masterclass in using simple mechanics and narrative devices to convey a story expertly. Most of Klonoa's big areas try to do something like this, but none of them are nearly as affecting as this level. They certainly do try, though. The last few levels in particular do their best to focus on sorrow as a theme. There are several problems with this. Without spoiling it, after the events of Klonoa the First, Klonoa himself should really be quite sorrowful, and that just never comes up. Once again though, emotionally, this is Lolo's story, so how does her relationship with sorrow and sadness come through towards the end? Reasonably well. Her self-doubt is put to the test again in a level after Maze of Memories, where she must find confidence again before helping Klonoa. The pirate Liarina is set up as her foil. Liarina is revealed to be a former priestess in training who quit after not gaining power quickly enough. Lolo is determined to become a priestess the right way, and by the end of the game she commits herself to achieving this goal, but it is all mostly in the background. The end of the game foregrounds a different character to exposit about the theme. The King of Sorrow, appropriately named, is introduced as the guy behind the guy. Turns out he's the reason Klonoa was summoned to Lunatea, and just wants the world to remember sorrow, both the name of his kingdom and the literal feeling of sadness. The Kingdom of Sorrow was banished to this other world, and all ringing the fifth bell would actually do is return the kingdom to Lunatea. After defeating the king, Klonoa agrees to ring the bell and sorrow is returned to the world. As a metaphor for confronting sadness instead of running from it, I would say this works well enough. It's heavy-handed, sure, but that does work for a morality play type story targeted at a younger audience. As a narrative sequel to Klonoa 1, I think Lunatea's Veil is seriously lacking, but as a sequel to the themes suggested by the end of Klonoa 1, I think this does pretty well for itself. Part 4. But like, How does it play, dude? So, all that stuff about the story is all well and good, but it doesn't help anyone if the game isn't mechanically engaging. Thankfully, Klonoa 2 mostly keeps what works and throws out what didn't from the first game. The basics remain the same, platforming feels light and flexible with plenty of control over your jumps and a short hover to give some margin for error. The game's central verb is the Wind Ring, which also remains fun and easy to use. The Wind Ring allows Klonoa to grab enemies and use them for a double jump or as a projectile against their allies. As the game progresses, new twists are introduced. Some enemies are too big to be grabbed and must be incapacitated by throwing smaller foes at them. Others carry shields which make them impervious to the Wind Ring from one side. This variety in the enemies also extends to how they respond to being grabbed by the Wind Ring. New enemies like this guy with the minerals growing out of his back and the blue eel-looking thing create interesting situations in navigation and puzzle solving. I do know what their names are, by the way. I'm just not going to tell you. Boss fights have a similar variety. Some of the bigger fights take place in these circular arenas, forcing you to consider the level in full 3D instead of 2.5D. This is not a new trick, but it is still a fun one. The first big change I noticed was the game's approach to backtracking. In the first game, you may have to go all the way to the left side of the screen to acquire a key, and then all the way to the right to open the corresponding door. This wasn't all that engaging and got repetitive pretty quick. Klonoa 2's backtracking is mostly localized to the 2 arc levels, but even so, it is much more engaging than before. Instead of collecting a key, the player flips a switch or triggers a change in the environment, and then must return to a new door or escape as a timer counts down. Making the necessity for backtracking both narrative and mechanical smooths over the irritation players may feel over having to play the same screen or two more than once. The other biggest change to gameplay is Klonoa's snowboard. In addition to the main platforming levels, there are 4 levels where Klonoa must snowboard down a mountain or other similar structure. From my distant childhood memories of Sonic Colors, this reminds me a little of that game. You go down a hill as quickly as possible while doing your best to avoid obstacles with a frustratingly small margin for error. This similarity is likely why I don't particularly care for these levels. I never have been, and likely never will be, a Sonic fan for just this reason. The requirement on a player to be both fast and precise works best for me in short readable bursts. Indie games like Velocity Ultra or 10 Second Ninja are 2 excellent examples of this. For me, this 3D attempted speed is much less readable and therefore repetitive. Although, if there ever comes a day when a 3D Flash video game comes out, I'm sure I will change my tune very quickly, but I digress. Overall, I think Klonoa 2 is a mechanical delight. In concert with the story and the visuals, the game works remarkably well. Part 5. Conclusion. Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil is a great game. Its mechanics are fun and intuitive, the visuals are stunning, and the story is simple but beautiful at times. While its narrative doesn't follow up on Klonoa Door to Phantomile nearly enough for my tastes, it has enough merits to stand on its own as a brilliantly fun game. For the curious, a remastered version of both the first and the second game, entitled Klonoa Fantasy Reverie Series, is available on PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series consoles, Nintendo Switch, and PC. They're both great remakes with a few very quick caveats. I think the colors are way too bright, and I do recommend turning off tutorials, otherwise the game cannot wait to not let you figure out anything for yourself. I had a lot of fun playing Klonoa 2, but what did you think? Was it not to your liking, or do you think it's an underappreciated gem? Let me know in the comments, and stay tuned for more PS2 in review.